organization within themselves, and fighting one of the most armed, organized fighters in Africa, which is the Ethiopian army. 25 years of that, and today it's a lot of controversy.
Yeah.
We have pros, we have against government right now, organized outside of the diaspora. What caused this? What brought us to this point today?
Okay. Just like you mentioned, if we go prior to independence, how the Eritreans struggle, a lonely struggle, so to speak. Nobody supported it. Even if they get the support, it was very minimal in comparison to what other African liberation movement get. Partly, it was, a lot of African countries see Eritrea as, see Ethiopia not as a colonial force, but there's a connection with Eritrea, historical claim. The other one is that is one, and it's also portrayed as externally supported movement by the king himself. So this, I guess, it makes it difficult. So Eritreans had to rely on their own, no other choice but on their own. And partly with the ammunition that they capture from the enemy, which is the Ethiopian forces. And that self-reliance concept developed during this period. He said, if nobody supported us, we can support our own. It works. It was during the liberation movement, and it was successful. Against all odds, Eritrea became the first independent country from another country within Africa, which is Ethiopia. That I'm saying in a very general sense. So if you don't get no support from outside world, you have to be innovative, creative. So they've done that. They go through that process, and they got their independence. So that trend, that trend has also helped the mentality of Eritreans not to depend on anybody else but on their own. That was the cause during the struggle. And it again, if I have to repeat myself, it was successful. The more they became self-reliant, the more they become determined to get their independence, and eventually they got the worldwide recognition on their strength and the stamina and the whole 9 yards. What happened after independence is a different story. Okay, it's okay to be self-reliant. It's okay to be careful and suspicious of foreigners involving on your affairs, because when you repeatedly been disappointed by foreign powers, you tend to be careful. So all your policies is designed to serve your own people. But the concept of democracy was not there. When you talk about self-reliance, it's good. You maintain your country, your integrity. You brought that a nation called Eritrea, which is a flag independence. Beyond the flag, there has to be social justice. That has not been implemented from day one. And unfortunately, the leadership of Eritrea uses as excuse, like above everything else, we need our independence. I agree with them, partially. Yes, we have independence, but you fought for people. You fought for the Eritrean people to have some sort of social justice, some sort of constitution, and a free system, free democracy. But at the expense of those rights, you cannot maintain the concept of a nation or a land. People live on that land. So the land and the people's liberty has to go hand in hand. That did not occur. In fact, it happened to the contrary. Repression became rampant. People were being forced to leave their country. As you see, every week, Eritrean tragic stories is very common. It's not uncommon to hear about when 500 people drowned in the sea. The majority happen to be Eritreans. In fact, 4 or 5 days ago, about 700 people drowned in the water, and they're saying that the majority were Eritreans. This is one of the reflection that because of the unlawful government who sustained himself by force for the last 25 years. Very repressive as a result of that. And of course, national service, as you know, is supposed to be designed for 2 years, but it extended. Some of them served over 10 years. There's few who claim to be there for 15 years. So there's no life for the youth. That's one of them. And no opposition. His own comrades. It's Isaias Afwerki. That's what I'm referring to. He put 15 of his close comrades who fought and brought the country after 25 years of struggle. I'm asking you. And nobody heard from them since then. I'm just showing you some example of what that government is doing to its own people. Media personalities, religious worshippers. I mean, every segment of the society has been affected by that brutal rule. So, to summarize it, yes, it's good to have a country, but a country without people doesn't mean anything.
True. And as you mentioned, it has been repressive as a form of ruling. The question, though, that comes to mind is it due to, because it's one of the countries that is the most isolated in the world today. There is a lot of foreign pressures, economic, political, that are put on this country right now. Are you thinking that this is due to those pressures, that he's forced now to rely on keeping the army still, open? Because if not, what does he do with all this youth in the country? How does he survive this economic repression that the world is putting on them without stating it? Because it's really a repressive system outside that is isolating the country and trying to make it collapse within. So which one comes first? Is it that is causing this, or this causing that?
Yeah, well, given Eritrean history, it's good to remain vigilant, to protect your country, because Eritrean has been disappointed by all forces, all powers, the external Europeans, the U.S., including our immediate neighbors. At one time, the Eritrean independence movement was short-lived because of the U.S. involvement in 1950s. After that, when the military government came in Ethiopia, the Soviets were against Eritrea. So if you see it, that's why that self-reliance concept has validity. It's strong base because of the disappointment. Everybody's against us. So the only thing that we have is each other, in that sense. But at the same time, you can go back even to liberation movements. The people who are demanding human rights, people who are asking for a better democratic procedures within that liberation movement has been killed. Killed no other than the current President Isaias Afwerki. I'm talking about way back in 1973, when he started labeling this movement as a destructive movement of 73. In Tigrinya they call it so it has a history of being brutal, since then. But then once he become brutal, once democracy put on the back seat, the rest is history. There's many incidents before independence that this guy was involved in eliminating dissidents, oppositions, and what have you. So equally as that self-determination, there's also that repressive measures has been growing. So twice they had a Congress, I think one in 77 or 78, the other one on 88, 10 years later. And on both programs of the EPLF, which is Eritrean People's Liberation Movement, they were reflecting this democratic principles. Once we have our independence, this is what we're going to imply, this is what our constitution is going to look like. Guess what? Since independence, we have no constitution. Just for the international or local consumption, he declared that we're going to have the constitution, and we all were engaged in a different diaspora community from I believe 74 to 77. But once the constitution is done, he called it a piece of paper. And he put some of the people who were responsible to implement that constitution in jail, like the commission that he handpicked, selects. This is a repression that goes on locally. And those media personality who were promoting the constitution were all in jail. There's an open letter written by the G15. They did not ask any, because we were engaged in Ethiopia. Ethiopia and Eritrea war was 98 to
2 years. It's
2 years,
98 to 2000.
2000, yeah. So it was wrong to start the war to begin with. It was started by Eritrea, maybe provoked by Ethiopia, but the war actually started by Ethiopia, and they went through the process of legal process. And the international community, Court of Justice, found out that the war started by Eritrea, but the human rights violation was burdened on Ethiopia. They were the one who was carrying all kinds of atrocities to the population. Once that is over, this G15, they were with the government. They stand on the side of the government till 2001. And the government officially declared that they're going to have an election sometimes a year later or something. And okay, they said if there's going to be an election, this is what we need to do. First, we have to assess the war itself. Was it a necessary war? Could we have avoided it? And the transition to democracy, how it's going to start. Because by then, already the government drafted media policy, election policy, political parties policy, how they're going to get involved. Isaias personally took this as a threat. So suddenly he said, okay, because he put the people in jail, and once he put them in jail, he put all kinds of garbage, saying that these people work for CIA, they were seen in the Italian embassy, a very cheap skit. For the last 15 years, no due process, not even their own family are able to see them in jail. Nobody knows where they are. I just read a report about 5 days ago. Out of 15, 14 of them are supposed to be dead. Nobody knows, whether they're still alive. The same in fact, double that number of media personalities are in jail. And the imprisonment and the killing goes on a regular basis. And roughly there's over 10,000 prisoners in Eritrea right now. There's political prisoners or people who wanted to escape, religious worshippers, again, just like I said, all kinds of population from different segments of the population in jail. I guess that's what it was, right?
Yeah. And the question is, for a young country, having had to fight for all this, it may be difficult to come up with what we call a democratic system right away, because the state is still weak. The infrastructure is too new. Democracy requires a lot of, because it's a consensus. It's a lot of push and pull within the system. Do you think that the system was strong enough to be able to implement a democratic system right away? Because we are still struggling in the US with this concept of democracy, how to implement it right for justice and equality for everybody. Don't you think that it's a challenge for a young government like that to be able to implement it right away and still stay stable?
I don't think it was a challenge. In fact, if any government are able to implement democracy, the Eritrean government were in a very conducive environment. They have a very highly disciplined population. And if you know the tradition of APLF, Eritrean government, they take their time. Even when they draft a constitution, it took them 3 years. The media law, the election law, everything was gradual and controlled, if I may say. Even with that controlled and managed